Children of the Corn is a 1984 horror film based on Stephen King's short story of the same name. The movie is directed by Fritz Kirsch and has become a cult classic in the horror genre. Plot overview. The story follows a young couple, Bert and Vicky, played by Peter Horton and Linda Hamilton, who encounter a town in Nebraska where all the adults have been murdered by children, led by a mysterious figure named He Who Walks Behind the Rows. The children believe that any adult in their community is corrupt and must be sacrificed to ensure their survival. Characters. Linda Hamilton, who you might recognize from The Terminator, plays Vicky, the skeptical and courageous wife of Bert. Bert, played by Peter Horton, is a doctor who is initially skeptical of the supernatural events, but gradually comes to understand the gravity of the situation. Themes. The film explores themes of fear, religious fanaticism, and the loss of innocence. It poses questions about the influence of ideology on young minds and the dangers of unchecked power. Genre. Children of the Corn falls into the horror genre, specifically supernatural horror. It taps into the fear of the unknown and the concept of children as both innocent and potentially menacing. Sequels and impact. Children of the Corn spawned numerous sequels and adaptations, including direct-to-video films and a 2020 remake. Each sequel generally attempts to expand on the original story with varying degrees of success. While the original movie remains a touchstone for horror fans, the sequels often receive mixed reviews. Overall, Children of the Corn remains a notable entry in the horror genre, particularly for its unsettling atmosphere and thought-provoking themes. Here's a 5-minute review of Silver Bullet, 1985, based on Stephen King's novella, Cycle of the Werewolf. Plot: Silver Bullet opens in the small town of Tarker's Mill, where a series of brutal and mysterious murders occur every full moon. The townspeople are on edge, and suspicion grows as more and more people are found dead, seemingly torn apart by some wild animal. Enter Marty Kozlaw, Corey Haim, a young boy who is confined to a wheelchair after a car accident, and his protective older sister Jane, Megan Follows. Marty starts to notice strange things happening around the town, and after witnessing a terrifying attack, he begins to suspect that the killer might not be human, but a werewolf. With the help of his Uncle Red, Gary Busey, Marty embarks on a quest to track down the creature and stop the murders. Characters. One of the movie's strengths is its characters, particularly the portrayal of Marty. Corey Haim gives a heartfelt performance as a young boy who, despite his disability, shows courage and resourcefulness. Marty's wheelchair-bound status isn't played as a weakness, but rather as part of what makes him a unique and determined character. The bond between Marty and his sister Jane adds a layer of emotional depth, with Jane serving as a loving yet protective sibling. Gary Busey's character, Uncle Red, provides some of the movie's more lighthearted moments, balancing the darker, more intense themes. His relationship with Marty brings a sense of warmth and humor to a story that could otherwise be weighed down by its horror elements. The rest of the town's characters are more archetypal and serve as fodder for the werewolf attacks, but they still play their roles effectively. Themes. At its core, Silver Bullet is about family, courage, and the loss of innocence. Marty and Jane's bond is central to the story, and their efforts to protect each other give the film an emotional grounding. The werewolf serves as a metaphor for the hidden evil that can lurk beneath the surface of a small town, mirroring the idea of a monster existing in plain sight, often overlooked by those around it. Another prominent theme is the nature of evil itself. The werewolf in Silver Bullet is not just an unstoppable beast, it's also a person, a symbol of how darkness can be concealed within someone close to us. The hunt for the werewolf becomes a search for truth, as Marty and his uncle attempt to unmask the creature's true identity, reflecting the universal human desire to confront evil. Special effects and horror. As with many films of the 1980s, Silver Bullet relies heavily on practical effects to bring its werewolf to life. The transformation scenes, while somewhat dated, are still impressive for their time, especially considering the era's limitations. The werewolf itself, designed by special effects maestro Tom Savini, is a solid representation of the creature, with a look that is simultaneously monstrous and humanoid. The transformation sequence though not as seamless as later films, still carries a visceral punch. While it may seem dated by today's standards, there's an undeniable charm in the practical approach, and it adds to the film's nostalgic horror vibe. Comparisons to other Stephen King films. In comparison to other Stephen King adaptations, Silver Bullet stands out as both a werewolf film and a coming-of-age story. King's knack for creating characters you care about really shines here, as the film is more character-driven than many other horror films of the time. Unlike some of King's other works that focus on larger supernatural or psychological horrors, Silver Bullet is more straightforward in its premise, but still carries the dark, small-town vibe that pervades much of his work. It's less a tale of the supernatural in the traditional sense, and more about the monsters that exist within people, and the struggle to confront them. Style and direction. Director Daniel Attias, who was relatively new to feature filmmaking at the time, does a good job creating an atmosphere of suspense and tension. The pacing is fairly steady, with the mystery of the werewolf's identity keeping things engaging. The film doesn't rush into the horror aspects, but builds them up gradually, letting the suspense linger. The small-town setting is captured well, giving it a sense of isolation that enhances the horror, making the idea of a monster lurking in the shadows all the more chilling. Conclusion. Silver Bullet may not be as famous as some other werewolf films, but it remains a beloved cult classic for fans of 1980s horror and Stephen King adaptations. It succeeds in blending heart, humor, and horror, creating a well-rounded experience. The characters are likable and relatable, and the werewolf itself is an effective villain. The Langoliers begins with a red-eye flight from Los Angeles to Boston, where a group of passengers wakes up mid-flight to find that most of the people on board have mysteriously disappeared. The remaining passengers soon discover they've somehow traveled through time to a strange, empty world. This limbo world is stuck in the past, with everything frozen in time. No animals, no people, just a still and eerie environment. As they try to figure out what happened, they discover the Langoliers, horrific creatures that devour everything in their path, including the remnants of time. The passengers must find a way to survive and return to their own time, all while avoiding the deadly Langoliers. Characters. The ensemble cast is one of the miniseries' strong points. The characters are a mix of everyday people with different backgrounds and personalities. David Morse plays the calm but slightly mysterious protagonist, while Dean Stockwell brings intensity to his role as Craig Toomey, a paranoid and mentally unstable character. While the characters are interesting, the development is a bit shallow at times. Still, the group's interactions provide enough tension to keep things moving forward, especially with the constant threats they face and the fear of being stuck in this strange time. Themes. The miniseries explores universal fears, including the fear of being lost in time and disconnected from reality. Time itself is a central theme, represented by the Langoliers as a force that consumes the past and moves forward without mercy. This relentless passage of time reflects a deeper existential fear of being left behind. On a more personal level, the characters each undergo a transformation as they confront their past and face their fears. There's also a sense of redemption as some characters change during their ordeal. Visuals and special effects. Unfortunately, the miniseries' special effects are quite dated. The Langoliers themselves are realized through CGI, which doesn't hold up well by today's standards and looks more cheesy than scary. The environments, such as the abandoned airports, also feel artificial, lacking the immersion that more polished sets could have provided. However, despite these visual shortcomings, the direction and atmosphere capture the eerie feeling of time being out of joint, adding some tension to the experience. Comparisons to the source material. As is typical with Stephen King's TV adaptations, the Langoliers take some liberties with the original novella, condensing parts of the story for the TV format. While the novella allows for more psychological depth, the miniseries has to streamline certain elements, focusing more on pacing and spectacle. This leads to a quicker, less atmospheric experience compared to the more nuanced tone of the original work. Final thoughts.
The Langoliers is a solid TV miniseries that is both ambitious and flawed. It has the eerie atmosphere of King's work, exploring the fear of time slipping away and the horror of being trapped in a strange, frozen world. The special effects and pacing may feel dated, but the core suspense and themes of personal growth and redemption are still engaging for fans of King's style of horror. While it may not be the best adaptation of his work, it remains an interesting and nostalgic watch for those who enjoy his brand of supernatural suspense.